Welcome, everybody. I'm Amy Keeler, Associate Director of Career Services at Dartmouth Thayer School of Engineering, and I'm honored to be co-moderating today's panel on careers in environmental consulting with my colleague from across the Ivies, Shotang Huang, Associate Director of Employer Outreach in the Center for Career Development at Princeton University. We are excited to be working together with our partners from the Ivy League schools on the first virtual and 18th annual All-Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Career Fair. This is the first in a series of career panels hosted in advance of the fair day, Friday, February 5th. We can't see you out there, but we know from past experience that the audience for these discussions includes underclassmen looking for internships, seniors, master's students and PhD candidates, and alumni conducting career exploration and looking for full-time jobs. We know there are a wide range of academic disciplines that attendees are focusing on, from environmental studies to engineering and policy and more. During our hour together, we will hear from 4 working professionals and esteemed alumni working in environmental consulting. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Jessica Brooks, a sustainability consultant of ENGIE Impact, alumna of Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Welcome, Jessica. Vijay Gudavaka, the chairman and CEO of E2 ManageTech, an Arcadis company, and alumni of University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. Sujay Natsan, regional environment and climate change consultant of UNICEF's East Asia and Pacific Regional Office. He is alumni of Brown and earned a master's in environmental change and management from Oxford. And Julian Nellums, an associate at BSR. Julian holds a Master of Environmental Management from the Yale School of Environment and specialized in business and the environment. Welcome all. We're going to start off by asking the panelists to provide you with a little more information about their backgrounds so you can become familiar with their areas of expertise. Next, Shotang will moderate a series of prepared questions. From there, we'll take questions from you, the audience. Please use the chat function to ask questions, and Shotang and I will share those with our panelists. We'll start with Jessica Brooks. Jessica, can you share a little bit more about your background, please?
Happily. Hi, everyone. Jessica here. You can see me waving. So I did my master's in environmental science at the Yale School of the Environment, now used to be FES. I was really interested in doing research when I went into my master's. So I came straight from undergrad and was interested in kind of specializing in water and then sanitation as it went on. Sort of interested in this nexus of sustainability and development in particular. So that brought me to doing my master's thesis and subsequent research in Haiti, looking at development programs related to water access and water availability generally. Became very interested and intrigued by local entrepreneurs, which led me to sort of doing a research project in Ghana on the social enterprise ecosystem, which led me to India for 4 years, working for some social enterprises to really get kind of a firsthand look at how they operate and their challenges to grow and scale. And then after 4 years in India, just in February of 2020, came back to the US and was just interested in getting back to core sustainability and really what businesses are doing, again, still at the nexus of impact through business. But more of a sustainability lens. And so for the last year, I've been working in consulting at ENGIE Impact on a variety of projects, which I'm sure I will tell you about further in the career panel.
Sujay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. So hi everyone. My name is in Environment and Climate Change at UNICEF's regional office here in East Asia and Pacific, based in Bangkok. So just a little bit of a background about me. In undergrad, my focus was on political science and geology. And during that time, I was trying to figure out a lot of, which area of even climate change I was kind of interested in. But the main areas that I was broadly interested in doing my undergrad was how climate impacts the most vulnerable people and vulnerable populations. And during that time, that's when I also kind of started becoming a bit more interested in research around climate finance policy. And then in my master's, my focus is pretty much on the same thing as well, but also a bit more on environmental litigation, as well as loss and damage. So how impacts on the most vulnerable that you cannot adapt to, essentially. And beyond my master's program, what I ended up doing was working for the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center. And during that time, my focus was on how do you use social protection innovations as to address some of the most challenging impacts in urban areas on vulnerable populations. So this included children and women, and as well as the disabled and elderly, for example. Following my time at the Red Cross Red Crescent, I worked then now where I am at UNICEF. So my current role at UNICEF is pretty much to integrate the main climate and environmental challenges and risks to children within UNICEF's programs across the region. So what that looks like is essentially UNICEF's programs in education, in health, for example, as well as water and sanitation, trying to make sure they become more climate proof. How do you integrate the main risks to children within those? So, for example, some specific issue areas might be like air pollution. How do you address some of the challenges to children from that? Water and sanitation, how do you integrate challenges from droughts and risks to children within UNICEF's programs? So that's a quick snapshot of the areas that I work on as my background. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Sujay. Next time I'll go with Vijay.
Thanks, Shashank. My name is Vijay Gudavaka. I could start. I've got a 31-year career in the environmental consulting industry. Maybe I'll start from my undergrad. My undergraduate is in civil environmental engineering. I also got a master's in civil environmental engineering, focused on air quality, pollution, dispersion modeling, long-range transport, and things like that. Started out of grad school working for an environmental consulting firm in Dallas, focused on air pollution and environmental impacts. Went to business school and got an MBA from Wharton after working for a few years and stayed back in this industry. Then ended up starting my own business in environmental consulting and enterprise risk management, which I sold to a firm called ERM based out of London. I was the CEO for ERM's business for about 13 years, worked through 4 private equity leveraged buyouts, took some time off, and then invested in another business called E2 Managed Tech that I was the chairman and CEO of. That's again focused on enterprise data management, environmental sustainability, risk management, which I sold to a company called Arcadis, which is a $4 billion, 27,000 employee firm based out of the Netherlands. We are on the Dutch Stock Exchange. I'm now an executive director at Arcadis and run our global business in this area of environmental, health and safety, sustainability, data management. So I've lived and worked across the world, and worked across many sectors and across the whole gamut of sustainability and EHS consulting. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So I'm sure a lot of students going to have a ton of questions towards you. Get ready. Last, I'm going to go with Julian.
Thanks, Jante. Hi, my name is Julian Nellums, and my sustainability career started in undergrad towards the end of it, where I took a class in international development, and I was introduced to the topic of corporate social responsibility, CSR, and thought that this is a really interesting topic. I was focused, prior to that, on international development and policy. I'm in public health, so was planning on going into maybe a global health type role, but wanted to shift my path a little bit. So I went to a master program at Yale School of the Environment, where I focused on business and the environment and learning more about corporate sustainability and the foundations of it. And during that master's program, I had the opportunity to dive into the environmental sciences, as well as take on a number of consulting projects where I mainly focused on supply chain sustainability. So topics like, how do we build more transparent supply chains? How do companies deal with the issues in their supply chain, such as human rights, environmental pollution across their supply chain, empowering workers. So that was a really great experience, and I wanted to dive into that more. And after grad school, I transitioned to BSR, Business for Social Responsibility, where I sit on a couple of different teams, mainly their human rights team, their supply chain team, as well as their sustainability management team, where I work with companies to help them implement different supply chain sustainability strategies, conduct human rights impact assessments, develop human rights strategies, all so that they could better identify their top issues across their supply chains, such as workers' rights, women's empowerment, and develop strategies to approach those different issues. So just a little bit about me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, normally in the past 17 years, normally you probably will hear all the audience give you a round of applause right now. Here's my applause here. I know there's 100 students joining this panel right now. So sorry we couldn't see you right now, but I'm sure you also a little bit glad you can stay home warm on this blizzard, really bad weather. But we will have really engaging conversation here, and definitely put your question in the chat box. But I will start with some prepared question for now. And like Amy mentioned, my name is Tang Huang. I'm the Associate Director for the Employer Outreach at the Princeton University. So it's such an honor to be here, meet all the speakers, and moderating this panel with Amy. So first question is with Jessica and Sujay. So what does your job entail on a day-to-day basis? And can you give us some examples in terms of your clients, project, and challenges? How about Jessica, you start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe I was just think about what I was working on last week for a quick snapshot, and then I can sort of briefly touch on what some of my other colleagues are working on in our team. So we're quite busy, I would say. We're a new team. So I was about the 12th person on the team when I joined the very end of February 2020. And now I think we're about 55 and planning to continue to grow. So last week, I was working on a project that's a consortium of healthcare companies, and they're currently profiling their Scope 3 emissions, so the emissions from their supply chain and also downstream. And they are interested in going down to kind of the supplier or product level understanding, so identifying the suppliers or the particular products that contribute most to emissions. And essentially, as a consortium of healthcare companies, develop strategies to do something about that. And hopefully, I mean, the broader idea is to use their collective power to move the market. So that's a project we just kicked off. Otherwise, I'm also working with a U.S. gas utility that's developing a green tariff, so an offering for their customers for selling renewable natural gas, so methane that's captured from wastewater treatment plants or landfills and kind of injected in the usual natural gas systems to basically bring that to market as a more sustainable form of for heating and so on, to replace natural gas, essentially. As a stepping stone, I'll note, to a transition to hydrogen as well. So debates on natural gas aside, but a renewable natural gas, that is. And then third, a small kind of piece of a project on advising an entertainment company on their ESG reporting. And then also doing a training to our team on science-based targets, which was a project I recently did. So it's kind of all over the board, which is great for me. This was the kind of point in the career where I wanted a lot of broad exposure to different topics in sustainability. But other parts of my team are also focused on mobility and energy and a number of other things.
Awesome. That sounds so interesting. Make me already want to join your team to work with you. Sujay, do you have anything to add from your point of view?
Yeah, so I guess the question is what do I do on a day-to-day basis? And one of the things that I really enjoy about my job is that there isn't really a day-to-day same thing that I do. So, for example, I think one of the things, maybe just for context too, I think people are quite familiar with UNICEF as a children's organization, and broadly it deals with children's rights. And one area of those rights is environmental rights. And access to their basic necessities like, food, air, water. Those are some of the main things, and anything that affects their health. So that's why climate change as a whole, it's kind of a new area for UNICEF to be even working on. And in my region, which is the East Asian Pacific region, I work with 14 country offices, so that covers about 26 countries. And in my team, if you want to call it a team, it's essentially full-time staff. We have just two of us. So it's me and my supervisor who's basically working on climate change. And we work with the country officers to help them think and integrate climate into their work. So for example of what one day in my work could look like is for last week, 2 weeks ago, one of our country officers approached us and asked, hey, we're thinking of developing our country program for the next 5 years. Can you help us integrate climate and environment into it? So the areas they were asking us was on health, on education, on health, water and sanitation, as well as nutrition. So my work then would be trying to understand what are the main challenges to children in that country. So for example, in the area of health, I found that, air pollution is still a significant problem in the country, both outdoor as well as indoor air pollution, and that affects child and maternal health significantly. Then, as well as in terms of water sanitation, there, I try to find what are some flood and drought risk maps. Which are the populations in the country which might be most affected in the near future due to some of those challenges. Nutrition involves, how do you there are some links and between deforestation and nutritional outcomes of children. So those are the challenges. And once I've done the work around finding what are the main challenges to children, then I have to integrate it into solutions. So then we come up with a number of solutions and ideas and proposals that the country office can then take a look at, and then we have a few discussions with them. And then they integrate it into their country program for the next 5 years. And this influences their budget allocations for the next 5 years, which is in the millions. But even just 2 days ago, one of the things I got approached to do with was one of the countries was coming up with a climate change law. And then we were asked to give inputs to it. So then I had to come up with looking at what are the key aspects in terms of strengthening it to make sure children and youth perspectives and most areas most important to them are integrated in that law as well. So that's kind of what my workday can look like. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really like you guys are bringing the social impact to this world. Next question I will go with Vijay. And like you mentioned, you have a 31 years working experience in this industry and with different companies, and have you're creating your own organizations. What's your opinion about some entry-level job for students interested in the environmental consulting? And in those entry-level positions, what type of the task and the responsibility should the students expect to take on?
Yeah, great question. And as you heard from Jessica and Sujay, environmental consulting, sustainability consulting is a very, very broad field, and all the way from air issues, water issues, waste management, contaminated soil management, sustainability issues like climate change and things like that. So very broad, lots of different technical areas that you can focus on. And you can choose to focus on any one of them. They're all great, right? Because they all kind of come together ultimately under this broad area of environmental consulting. Depending on which country you work in, there's lots of environmental health and safety regulations. So a lot of what you might be doing early on will be driven by regulation. So whatever you do, you need to focus on what are your customers' business objectives? What are they trying to do and why? Is it regulatorily driven, or is it an operational issue, or is it a reputational issue? So it's a broad spectrum of issues, regulations, and processes that you can choose to start in. But as you grow in your career, you tend to get broader and a better understanding of how all of these can be addressed in a more holistic manner, right? So very broad and lots of options, lots of firms that either specialize or are broad in terms of offering multi-service offerings to countries or industrial customers.
Thank you so much, Vijay. Next question I would like to direct to the Julian. You work for the Business for Social Responsibilities. In the current landscape, we'll know the diversity, inclusion, and equity is such a big topic right now. How's your organization including this diversity and inclusion commitment to your work?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, at BSR, we recognize that diversity, equity, and inclusion is integral to everything that we do as an organization. As many of you may not know, BSR, it works across a number of different issue areas, from sustainability management, so setting a company's sustainability strategy, human rights, climate goals as well. And we recognize that companies they can't make as much progress as they can or they should without integrating diversity, equity, inclusion into those strategies. So at BSR, we're really ensuring that all of our work and our project work ensures that we are considering the most vulnerable populations, the most marginalized populations in our engagement work. So, for example, if we're working on a human rights impact assessment with a mining company, when you want to take an intersectional approach and ensure that we're engaging with populations, a diverse array of stakeholders such as indigenous populations, women at the mining sites or extractive sites, and ensuring that we understand their issues and what they're facing on a day-to-day basis, and ensure that those challenges are addressed in the company's strategy, to ensure that that everybody in the most marginalized populations in particular, their issues are addressed. We're also ensuring that it's baked into a company's broad sustainability strategy from the get-go. So ensuring that they have ambitious DEI goals and ensuring that they engage stakeholders that they normally wouldn't, that bear the brunt of the company's impacts across their supply chain, not just where they operate in one place, but globally, since all of these companies most of the ones that we work with are multinational companies. So those are just a few ways that we're working to incorporate DEI into all of the things that we do at BSR, because we know that ensuring that vulnerable populations are at the forefront of this work.
Awesome. It seems like your company set up the great vision for the future. As a follow-up question, since we're talking about the future, what do you think about the future of this field and how the students should be prepared for it? I know there's a big debate between the students, and they're thinking about, is it better to be a generalist or focus on the specific area of interest? Could you elaborate on that and share your insights?
Yeah, sure. So I don't think I have there's one right way. I started very much as a generalist. So coming into BSR, I was interested in a bunch of different fields. And because of that, I got to work on a bunch of different things. So from sustainability strategy to climate strategy and TCFD to human rights. And being a journalist and having those wide array of interests, I got to understand all of the different aspects of sustainability, from the more environmentally focused side to the more quote unquote people side. And that's a power in itself. I think as you get further in your career, it is important to develop under a specific skill set that kind of underlines all of those things. So ensuring that you are building upon the skills that you have and focusing on a specific area, but it's good to also the other areas and be able to speak to all of the different aspects of environmental consulting. So I took the more generalist path, and I'm starting to focus it more on a specific area so that I can build on that specific skill, which for me will be supply chain sustainability specifically. And even that's a broad field, so you can even dig down into that as well.
Cool. Thank you so much, Julian. Anybody else have a different thoughts on it? Okay, Jessica.
Yeah, happy to go. I kind of agree, actually, with Julian. I think there's room for both. It's best to pick eventually. But just thinking about the directors that are part of our team at NG Impact, and specifically our team in Sustainability Solutions, which is the kind of strategy consulting arm of the company, we have actually, the directors come from very different backgrounds. Like, we have the former chief climate negotiator at the State Department, and then we have people who went up the ranks at McKinsey, for example, and they're all great at what they do. I would say that they're also very different. Like, some are really deep specialists and others are just really great at their skills, and it makes kind of a really interesting and unique team, I think. But I think nevertheless, they're all kind of, if they're not already specializing in something, they're moving to become deeper specialists in something. But I think the field in general is just, there's so much to do, and it's so fast moving, so much is changing so quickly, that it's like you need to find people who know what's going on and kind of have expertise. So I think it's also a really great opportunity to you can kind of become an expert in the field very quickly if you can find someone else who's already an expert to learn from, because it's so fast moving that other people may not have kind of the access or knowledge to really understand what's happening as fast as it is.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jessica. This actually reminds me of another question, and thinks you work for some large international firm, and I know some students also have questions about, they're always, once they freshly graduate from school, they're always debating, should they go to a large, big firm with a big brand name, or should they go to some smaller boutique firms, and because they can try different experience and try different work aspects. What do you take on that?
Yeah, so I can't probably speak to a small firm, but I think something that's probably unique from our large firm perspective, our team is, so just maybe some context, our sustainability solutions, like the strategy consulting team in the US is around 50, 55, but we also have teams in APAC and EMEA covering Europe, Middle East, and India, and Africa, actually. And then we're part of NG Impact, which has different sustainability services. And then we're part of NG, the large energy company. So I think one difference is that we have to differentiate internally from all of the kind of expertise that already exists and the advising that goes into doing projects, the implementation. But also the kind of the difference associated with that is that we have all of this implementation capabilities and really deep expertise in a lot of different areas that we can sort of pull into our projects to make sure that the advising that we're doing, the consulting that we're doing, is also kind of grounded in this implementation perspective, which is kind of a unique part, I think, of our firm. I think another key difference that I've seen just from companies I've interviewed with is a sustainability consulting firm in India, for example, may help the sustainability of, say, GAP's operations or any kind of major global brand, their operations or their suppliers that are based in India. Whereas like a sustainability consulting firm that doesn't have global reach, is based in the US, will just focus on the US operations or more like traditional strategy things. But I think with a large international consulting organization like ours, we can actually have kind of like the boots on the ground, if you will, to kind of be able to look at the portfolio of their sites and help them identify like the sites that you should really focus on from like an emissions perspective or a risk perspective. Just a couple observations. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Vijay, would you like to chime in since you work on the different sides of organizations?
Yeah, happy to add to that. It is both, right? I mean, I started my career with a small specialist firm out of Dallas, Texas, and it was great because we grew 20 times in revenues. I got to do a lot of different things, open up offices, move around, opening up offices, and helping the business grow. And what I told people back then was age rapidly because you grew at the rate you could consume information, and there were no protocols and rigid, promotion criteria and things like that. So it was exciting, right? And then I've obviously started my own businesses and sold them to large multinational firms like ERM or Arcadis. And there's benefit to that too, right? You get to Jessica's point, you get access to global experts, feet on the ground. You really don't have to try to do everything yourself. You really can identify the talent that you have in a global firm, whether it's a process specific issue or a country specific issue. And so there's fun and learning both ways. And I think it really comes down to, you as an individual and your aptitude and your attitude and your desire to learn, because there's so much, it's such a broad area that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And having worked in both 2 or 3 types and started my own business and all that kind of good stuff in between, I've just over 31 years of working in this area, just loved every minute of it and feel like I'm still learning every day. There's new stuff going on every day. So I think it's a little bit of what you put into it, but definitely both platforms can, depending on your personality and your persona, can create value, and you can create value for the firm.
Great. Always have that learning spirit on, even you graduate, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah. So all of you are, already in either a middle or senior position in your firm, and of course, and we have an executive director here. I'm sure you'll hire some employees and interns. So what students, when you hire them, what academic experience or internship, and make the students can make the case and convincing you there will be a good suit for the environmental consulting? Anybody would like to share your thoughts on it?
I could share some thoughts.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking from the BSR's perspective, I think we have interns from time to time, and one thing that interns really succeed at when they succeed in BSR is when they are able to compile a lot of research and analyze it and filter that into a clear recommendation or a clear suggestion for a company or approach. So being able to have an internship experience or a project experience at school where you've had to do a lot of different research on a lot of different topics and on complex topics, and then communicate that into a clear recommendation. That's one skill that definitely I've seen set interns and other associates at my level too apart from the broad talent pool, right? So I think that's one thing to focus on in experience and going into these positions and entry-level positions there.
Great. Anybody else want to share your thoughts? Okay, Jay.
Yeah, so I think especially for internships and academic experiences, it's actually really simple. In the end, it just comes down to whether or not you have the skills and experience that fit the job description. to prepare yourself for that, I think one of the key issues that you have to tackle yourself is trying to figure out what do you want, and then trying to then figure out, what kind of jobs and internships you want to go for. So for myself, I was more interested broadly in the area of climate justice and how climate change impacts the most vulnerable people. And to kind of build my, expertise and credibility in that area, I think one of the things I did during undergrad was working with my professors to try and do a bit of research in those areas. And, now some of my professors, well, one of the things I can say is, at Brown, one of my professors had a class on climate change policy. And that was in my senior year where I decided hey, I think climate change might be the thing for me. And I took up his class. It was a seminar class, but he also had a policy research lab on the side. So I got engaged in that. And so within the next 1 or 2 years, pretty much even before I graduated, I had already published 2 or 3 peer-reviewed journal papers on the specific areas in climate change that I was interested in. And that was a great way to kind of build your academic expertise, to kind of show the case to my future employers that, hey, this is what I'm interested in, and I have the expertise in this area, and you can trust me in that sense. So I think that was really useful in my experience, at least.
Cool. Awesome, thanks. And since we're talking about this internships experience, and I'm sure we all start from our first internship, right? So on our first earlier career experience, and what are those some unexpected elements or something surprised you when you start environmental consultings? Are there some frustrations or something you wish you knew before you start in this career? Anybody want to share some stories?
I can share a couple of things.
Okay, thanks.
I started out a little bit more on the specialist area, right? And I had a master's and a bachelor's in engineering, and I'd done a lot of research in the area. But I started working, I remember just being shocked at how much I didn't know and how much I had to learn, and how little I knew compared to what this whole body of study and look is. And like I said, after 31 years of consulting, I'm still learning every day, whether it's different drivers, different ways of doing things, different things in different countries, whether it's social aspects, the climate change aspects. And it's such an evolving and challenging field that it keeps me stimulated. Yeah, but I remember starting out thinking, oh, I really don't know anything. And I still kind of feel that way these days too. Don't tell my employees that, but I really feel like I'm winging it every day because you're constantly addressing something new every day.
Great. We see a lot of question comes in from students, but I just want to ask the last prepared question here. If one of you, or everybody, could share one important career piece and advice to students, and we're gonna wrap up the Q&A session right now, and then we're gonna go to the students' questions. So, Jessica, would you like to start? Some important career advice to share with students?
I have two. It's hard to pick one. One is true what they say about how important networking is. And the other one that I would personally advise is to follow your curiosity. I think it can show how passionate you are about what you're doing, and really, I think allows you to kind of access your inner drive and solve interesting problems and just learn a lot in the process. And to bring a unique perspective, I suppose.
Awesome. Vijay?
I think every one of you are smart. You're studying at great schools. You're going to learn a lot. You're obviously got to where you are because you were great. And, I think as you continue in this journey, whatever job you do and wherever you go, obviously Jessica's point, the curiosity and learning is important. But for me, it's attitude and aptitude and the ability to just constantly be seeking. At some point, you're going to have the degrees and the resume and all that stuff, but attitude and aptitude in the consulting world and focusing on delivering the best business outcomes for your customers, whether it's a country or a state or an industry. is really understanding the why. Why am I doing this, and how does this matter? Is really critical.
Julian?
Yeah, so I think, definitely emphasize Jessica and Vijay's point. I think I'd just piggyback off that a little bit and say, focus, keep impact, at the forefront of your mind, and always ensure that, whatever you are working on, whatever you are pursuing, it's not detached from the populations that it's going to impact or the regions it's going to impact the most, and in specific ways. I think if that, combined with the, the advice that you just heard, that'll, make you, a better environmental professional, a better sustainability professional overall, and set you on a path to success. So just keep that always at the forefront of your mind as well.
Thanks. Sujay?
Yeah, so I think for most of our audience, we are still in school. And I just want to emphasize that make use of the time that you have here in school. And one of the key pieces of advice I got from a music professor actually when I was in undergrad was like saying, undergrad and especially college was an opportunity for me to explore, try out all the different subjects and different areas. Because the key thing is once you finish school, you have to kind of have a rough idea of this is what I'm interested in and this is why I'm interested in it. Because once you join your job or the whole job sphere, you're not going to really have the opportunity to have that kind of flexibility to explore as much. So try to find what is it that drives you while you're still in school, and try to figure that out while you can. That's my main piece of advice.
Thank you, Sujay. Actually, it's a really good segue to one of the students' question here. The students was asking how important it is to have a higher level degree, master or PhD, since you guys pick the subject you like, and when students apply for environmental consulting jobs, what do you guys think about those high-level degrees?
Yeah, I can go if that's okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things is, when I was finishing my undergrad, my background was pretty broad. So, I think for most of us in the Ivies, we tend to have a lot of a liberal arts kind of a focus. So, my background was pretty much in political science and geology, but I had changed my concentration pretty much every year. So when I was finishing my undergrad, I needed to kind of say that, I am interested in climate change, and this is what I'm specifically want to work on for the next few years. And that's why I needed to get a master's. And the master's kind of did equip me with the specialist skills that I needed for the job scope. And when I was applying for jobs, and I think I can speak from experience with working for the UN, a lot of the jobs that you might want to get as a consultant do have a minimum requirement of you having a master's degree to show that this is the minimum requirement. And if you don't have a master's degree for most of the jobs, the consultant position, you probably won't even be considered. So that's why it's important to have a master's degree for, at least for the UN jobs, from my experience.
Got it. It's good to have that master's degree, huh? Anybody else want to share your thoughts, or you have a different ideas?
I can give some real world data.
Cool, sure. Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, I think most of the analysts, consultants, and managers at our company do have master's degrees. I have a colleague who's asked whether she needs to. She doesn't currently, and she's wondering if she'll be able to kind of move up. She just got promoted, so she's doing okay. But it's kind of it's an ambiguous question internally. I think you can still prove yourself and prove your skills and expertise internally, but it might be harder to kind of move around potentially at some point.
For sure, yeah. I think a lot of times the degree does open the door for you, but for you to get a job and promoted, and students still should work on their transferable skills and also people skills too. Amy, would you like to ask the rest of the other question from the students?
Yeah, I'd love to pose the next question. So, actually, Sujay brought up a really good point when he was talking about making use of time when you're in school and trying everything. One of the participants wants to know, what classwork would you suggest for students to build skills today valuable in today's marketplace? What core skills should students have when they're entering environmental consulting? Does anyone want to pop in?
Maybe just really quickly, yeah, if nobody else.
Great.
Yeah, I think one skill that I wish I worked on more, and that I'm working on now is just data analysis. I think in the sustainability field, kind of broadly, it's important that you do have some type of understanding of data analysis and how you can incorporate data-driven insights into your environmental recommendations or your sustainability recommendations, especially from the business side. I think a lot of the companies we work with, they do want to see that there's some type of data, quantitative or qualitative data, that backs up recommendations, so that they can take it to their leaders who make the decisions on really important environmental and sustainability topics. So you get to just understand that broadly, or do a deep dive. I think it's really beneficial to understand how data can be incorporated into sustainability and environmental consulting.
Great. Before anybody chiming, should I ask the next question? Okay. So students are also curious to know during the pandemic and how the COVID impact your organization and your job, and also what's your advice on for the entry-level positions for students stand out and reach out to professionals during the COVID-19 time?
I can take that.
Thanks.
I do think in a lot of course, Q2 and Q3 of 2020 tough, many businesses, and still tough. But in the broad area of environmental consulting and sustainability consulting, I think a lot of the work is regulatorily driven and compliance driven too, depending on whether you're working for industry or countries. And the upside, even if it's not compliance driven, and you heard from other panelists, this is kind of the way we need to be living and doing business going forward in a sustainable way, looking at social impacts, looking at climate change. And so we've gotten beyond compliance. So between a lot of it being compliance driven and CEOs of companies and countries realizing they've got to get beyond compliance, I think this is a great career, right? Obviously, I've been in it for a long time. And I think there are companies hiring. I think you heard Jessica talk about the growth in her firm. There are companies hiring and their companies growing. And it's a nascent problem, and it's growing in multiple dimensions. And so I think there's going to be an ongoing need for folks to come to address these multidimensional problems. And so the pandemic has impacted, some businesses, but I think in the long term, this is not going to go away. And I think companies are interested in talking with students who are interested. There are internships, and there are companies hiring and growing, in even small firms and even big firms. So reach out. I think there are folks really happy to talk with you and have informational sessions or connect you with their staff, so you can get what's out there and what folks are working on.
Anyone else wants to share some advice on that? Help the students stand out?
Yeah,
Sujay.
so I think the pandemic has affected a lot of our work, at least. So UNICEF is one of the biggest vaccinators essentially in the world. I think UNICEF is also in charge of rolling out the COVID vaccines in many parts of developing countries. And so it's challenged a lot in my own personal daily work, because if not for the pandemic, I would actually be able to do country missions to go and understand, the context on on site. One of the main challenges that children are facing in terms of climate and environment in their country, and do field visits in that sense. But I'm not able to do that at the moment. So a lot of it has become so that is one of the main areas in which I'm affected. In terms of how it impacts entry-level jobs, I think what we're seeing right now is a lot of the new hires, and it's being done remotely. So I think there's a bit more flexibility of hiring someone from different countries, and it's okay if they're not able to move to where the office is based, which is in Bangkok, but being open to working remotely for us from wherever they're based. And I think we're having a lot more flexible work arrangements due to the pandemic, and it's just how the global situation is right now.
Thank you, Sujay. I think the virtual networking can be intimidating, right? And I sometimes, even for my own job, I reach out to employers, and then when I send an email, don't get back for a couple of days. I don't know what they're thinking. So based on experience, when students reach out to you, are there some good questions make you want to connect with them, or are there some common mistakes you see students are making when they reach out to you and they want to seek out some career advice? Would you like to share your experience on that? Jessica?
I'm happy to. When I was early in my career, and I knew I wanted to go a kind of untraditional direction, work for a small startup in, maybe India, for example. I did a lot of networking. I did like 20 to 25 informational interviews with people across a variety of different roles and organizations. And I think the thing I most learned about that was, one, you can really approach that kind of systematically and how you reach out to people. And I think what really makes the difference is to tell them why you're reaching out, like why you find them and their work in particular interesting, just so that you can kind of lower the bar. I think a lot of people, professionals, have a ton of virtual calls now, since you don't have like that time in the office just to catch up quickly. And so, kind of lowering the bar and giving some sense of expectation on what you want the conversation to be about and what you'd like to learn from a conversation with them, I think can help go a long way.
Definitely. And be persistent, follow up, right? Everybody's so busy now.
Thanks for that. And I have another question from a participant. We all have some great vision when we look back at things. Looking back, what are some things that you wish you had known before you entered environmental consulting? Are there some common frustrations within the field or within your job that you can share with everybody?
I'm happy to start. Take that, Amy.
Great.
As I've said, I think it's realized. I don't think it's frustration. I think it's challenges, or it's part of what keeps me going in this business. It's just such a dynamic, changing, again, multidimensional area that not only blends the technical aspects, but you really need to also understand business, which is why I went and got an MBA in finance and stayed in this business, even though I'm an engineer, because you really need to understand why things are happening, the impact on people or the environment, and the business case, right? At some point, it does come down to it. I mean, for industrial customers, and then maybe other segments. So yeah, I did go back and get an MBA in finance because I wanted to apply business thinking and financial thinking to these challenges, but also make sure we don't lose the technical aspects. So yeah, I wish I had those to kind of curate all those different abilities and skill sets. And there's only so many classes you can take in school, right? But the breadth of what you need to know, which is challenging and exciting, is pretty broad in terms of looking at the environmental aspects, the social aspects, the risk management, the business aspects, and what's going on across the world. When you look at different sectors, different types of industries, different parts of the world, all of these add a different flavor to the challenges you're trying to solve. So it's an evolving kind of area, and constantly staying on top of things is the challenge, but also the opportunity, and also what keeps me going.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else want to add to some things they wish they had known?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I can. So one of the things that I guess we need to understand is, I think we're all here because we're interested in broadly in climate change and the environmental field. But what we need to understand is that when we go out of this bubble and go into the real world, not everyone's going to be as interested as us. So you're going to be speaking to and working with people who don't understand why climate change is important and how environmental degradation affects the lives of people.
Yeah.
So you need to kind of try to make those connections. And I feel like that was something that I had to learn as well. How do you connect with people outside of the bubble that you've kind of worked in and you're passionate about, and trying to make those connections. How do you adapt the language that you use? How do you and that was something I think was really useful in both my undergrad and master's, where I had a breadth of different topics and interest areas, and I was able to find connections between very different areas that were not directly connected. But yeah, how do you make those connections and make the case to people that you work with why exactly what you're working on is important?
Great. We're getting really close, and I think we can squeeze one more question here. Students was asking, as a sustainability and environment consulting, it can be very technical, and how do you stay on top of all those emerging technologies like blockchains and AI, how that affecting your work? Maybe you can share some professional podcasts or publications or any influencer you're following, and any advice.
I could go really quickly.
Sure.
One that I share, that I follow semi-regularly is GreenBiz. If you're into business and sustainability, they have a number of newsletters, depending on what you're interested in, that they send to you on like a weekly, daily basis. So if you're interested in energy, blockchain, circular economy, they're a good source to keep in touch with. So that's one that I would follow. I'm also interested to hear what the other panelists are following too.
Happy to curate a list. I can't think of any of the podcast names off the top of my head, but double on GreenBiz.
How much time you guys spend to stay on top of those news? Is like a couple hours a week, or what is a good time for students to locate those times?
I think it's a constant learning. I mean, whether it's blockchain or AI or what's going on with climate change and carbon trading and social issues, the more you can keep yourself open to conversations and getting information, whether it's Financial Times or whether it's GreenBiz or whether it's technically focused channels. I do think, again, it's a multidimensional area, and you need abilities and knowledge and skills from multiple domains, which makes this exciting. But it's constant. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly looking at podcasts, attending conferences, or speaking at conferences, and learning from experts in a variety of these different areas. So I don't know if I'd put a time on it. I've never really thought about it. But like I said, every day is a new day, and it's constantly learning some of the old stuff, but also all these new things that are coming in that need to be applied to this whole area of environmental consulting.
Thank you, Vijay. That reminds me the quote from Steve Jobs, and stay hungry, stay foolish, right? Well, we're kind of only have 1 minute left here, and I thank you guys so much. It's such an honor to speaking with every panelist here, and you guys share your experience and all the advice and insights about this industry. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you to also the participants.
Thank you.
It's been so nice getting to know you all, and thank you for your questions. I think everyone here is open to the participants connecting with us on LinkedIn, so please feel free to do that. Thank you for your valuable time, everyone.